Katie here, and it is of course time to talk about Shadowhunters. So episode 7, Salt in the Wound. I really enjoyed this episode, mostly because of everything with Jordan and Maya, and also because we got to see the characters really work together in this episode. They all come together because of Jace. I don't mean this in a bad way, but I really like that Jace was taken out of the equation in this episode. I liked that his actual character wasn't present. It was just his controlled version, because that gave the other characters a chance to group together, work alongside each other, and we haven't really had much opportunity to see that happen this season. So as sad as the situation is for Jace, I am glad that everyone else was able to come together over it. This episode was also packed full of emotion for several different reasons. This episode starts directly after the end of the last episode, and we end up with this fantastic fight scene between Jace and Clary. I loved this scene so much. I don't know what it was, but I just enjoyed getting to see Clary kick the shit out of possessed Jace. It was very satisfying, and I don't know why. I loved how fast-paced that fight scene was and how well it was shot. And you know, she was starting to get the upper hand on him until he grabbed her throat. That scene between the two of them on the rooftop, I felt so sorry for Clary in this scene because she really wanted to believe that Jace could fight through that possession. She was holding on to hope that some part of him was still there. When she kept repeating that she knew he wouldn't kill her, my heart broke for her in that moment, because of course we knew that Jace was going to throw her off the building because we'd seen it in the promo. So we knew what he was going to do. Poor Clary ends up unable to move on top of this car. I love that Simon was the first person that she called as well. Given the situation in this season, we really haven't gotten to see much of Clary and Simon working together. So I appreciated the fact that it was Simon that came to help her. I assume he went to go and get someone to draw healing runes on her, because in the next scene she was completely fine. Not emotionally, but physically she was fine. So as I was saying before, Jace being out of the equation in this episode really brought the characters together, and finally Clary opened up and told everyone the truth. I absolutely adored the scene in the Institute when she told Izzy, Alec and Simon what had really happened on the night that Raziel was raised. Kat did such a fantastic job in this scene as well, because as Alec and Izzy were talking and discussing what to do about Jace, you could just see her rolling everything around in her mind. You could see her getting more teary, and you knew that she was just edging towards that point where she was going to tell them the truth. And then we got such a lovely moment between Clary and Alec. I knew that he wasn't going to turn her in for keeping this thing a secret anyway, but when he walked around the table to give her a hug, that moment, so pure, because Jace is his parabatai. Of course he would have done exactly the same as Clary did. So I'm glad that somebody finally gave her that reassurance that what she did wasn't wrong. Of course, when you love someone, you're going to do everything you can to save them, especially if they die right in front of you. She panicked and she did what anyone would have done in that situation. So I'm glad that Alex said what he did to her. In this episode, Magnus also figures out that Lilith is the greater demon that they're working against. He works with the rest of the characters in this episode because he thinks he might be able to temporarily reverse what Lilith has done to Jace, but they also need some way to contain him. So that means Alec, Izzy and Clary end up going to Alicante to retrieve some technology that Malachi developed. So finally this meant that we got to go back to Alicante for a little while. Every time I see the place, it just looks beautiful, and I always want to spend more time there. Not only did we get to see it in the day, but we got to see it during the night as well. So we got a beautiful establishing shot in daylight, and the towers look gorgeous there. But then when it got to night, we got an establishing shot of it at night. It just looked exceptionally pretty. They have done a really good job of decorating Idris in this show. They always make me want to see more. So they go to Alicante to talk to Imogen Herondale. With Jace being her grandson, they think that she's more likely to hide it from the Clave, let them have the technology in secret, because Jace being under Lilith's possession means that they have a right to kill him to fix it, because it's such a high level of danger. They knew that Imogen wasn't going to let it come to that if she could help it, so she agrees to give them the technology in secret. Now, we need to talk about poor Imogen in this episode. I love that she didn't die how she did in the books. I love that Jace got to spend some more time with her after finding out that she was his grandmother, which is something we never got to see in the books. But every time we did see her in the show, I always knew that we were on borrowed time. She wasn't supposed to be alive, so I always had the feeling that she was going to die at some point. I just wasn't expecting it to happen in the hands of Jace. He gets sent by Lilith to the cemetery where Valentine is buried because she needs some of his flesh for her whole master plan to revive Sebastian. So of course Jace ends up going whilst the others are there because they have been there and explained to Imogen the situation with Jace. When she sees him, she knows that it's not really Jace, it's somebody under Lilith's control. The minute I saw him standing in her office, I knew that was it now. Her time was definitely up. There was no way she was going to get out of this alive. That whole scene was so horrible, especially because she knew that he had ulterior motives for going in the cemetery. She tried her best to stop him when he took that dagger from her. No. And then he cut off her thumb to get access to the cemetery. It just wasn't nice to watch. Poor Imogen did not deserve to die this way. Definitely more horrific than her death in the book, I think. Just because we got more of her in the show, she'd formed some sort of relationship with Jace. So for him to be the one to kill her, yeah, that was heartbreaking. She managed to write out a fire message to Alec before she died. I mean, I assume she is dead. It didn't look like she was coming back from that attack. So Alec gets the message whilst they're still in Alicante. So they go after Jace in the cemetery. They manage to trap him. Clary portals them back to Magnus, but stays in Alicante herself, because obviously people are out looking for, I assume, whoever killed Imogen. So poor Clary stays behind and ends up getting arrested. Nice! Whilst all this is going on in Alicante, Simon is helping Luke find the location of Lilith. He had some sort of tracker installed for Ollie that allowed him to find out where Lilith was staying. Poor Ollie, oh my god, she does not deserve this. Sam coming to Luke in the police department broke my heart a little bit. Poor Sam, she hasn't got a clue what's going on. She gave Luke a slap. I mean, you know, it's not entirely Luke's fault that this situation happened. Ollie was the one that kept pushing about werewolves. Luke did what he had to do and it got him a slap. But you know, I don't blame Sam because I would do exactly the same thing in her situation. At least she is safe though. Ollie did kill her mum, which, you know, isn't a good thing. She still killed a loved one. But it wasn't Sam. So at least if Ollie gets out of this alive, she does have someone to go back to. I hope she gets out of this alive, because if she ends up dying... So Luke and Simon go to the place where Lilith is. That scene between Luke and Ollie, I felt so sorry for him, because he's going to blame himself for Ollie being put in this situation, even though it's not his fault. But we know what type of person Luke is. He takes these things to heart because he's such a good person. So he is definitely going to blame himself for what has happened to Ollie. I hated that he had to see her like this. I dread to think what's going to happen with her in the rest of the episodes. So the other main thing going on in this episode is the storyline with Maya and Jordan. Poor Maya had to find out this week that her boyfriend was living with her ex-werewolf boyfriend who turned her into a werewolf. That scene where she found out, she knocked unexpectedly on the door, and of course Jordan didn't have enough warning to get out of there, so they ended up coming face to face. Simon was not happy, and can you blame him? He's been lied to twice by this guy. So throughout this episode, we got flashbacks of Maya and Jordan's relationship. I absolutely adored these flashbacks, even though there was a lot of drama going on with Jace and the others. This was my favourite part of the episode, finally getting to see some of Maya's backstory. These flashback scenes were done so well. I love the way they met. Of course, it's super cute at first, and then it all goes to shit. I appreciated the fact that Maya was reading A Tale of Two Cities during that scene where they first met. I like that these flashback scenes were placed throughout the episode. We got one from Maya while she was sitting at the table in Jade Wolf. That kind of took her back to their first meeting. And then we had Jordan calling up the Praetor and saying that he couldn't stay there anymore. And we got his flashback of their relationship, I assume a few months after they first met. Aside from the obvious werewolf issue, you could see that their relationship was going to hit difficulties anyway without that, because they both clearly wanted different things. So I liked that it showed trouble brewing between them before Jordan's transformation. What I really loved is that they didn't show us too much. We see Jordan's scratch, we know what's going on. We have a scene between Maya and Bat in this episode where she gets a surge of confidence to go and say her piece to Jordan. He's parked outside the restaurant, obviously trying to talk to her. She confronts him first. What I loved is that you can see the contrast from Maya when she was in a relationship with him to her now. She's a lot stronger. She's not taking any shit from him. She's also not willing to listen to his excuses. After that scene with him in the car, we get a flashback of after he attacked Maya. I really appreciate the fact that they didn't actually show us that attack. This scene was like beautifully done, where you see Jordan on the floor without his clothes, and then he gets up, sees the blood on his hands, and then goes over to Maya. Everything about that scene was brilliant. It was chilling. They managed to get across how horrible it was without showing Jordan physically attacking Maya. So I love the way they worked the flashbacks in this episode. It just worked really well. At the end of the episode, Maya goes to see Jordan. She walks in as he's about to leave. He's written her a letter to explain things, and I love that she called him out for being a coward in this moment, because he was going to walk away again and not give any sort of explanation face to face. The fact that he put it in a letter, such a shitty thing to do. He just needs to face up to it. So I love that she finally got her chance to say the things that she'd been feeling and to make it clear that they were not going to get along, they were not going to be friends, but that he was also not going to leave Simon. She cares for Simon so much, but she also knows that Jordan is there to help him. So regardless of what's gone on between them in the past, she doesn't want Jordan walking away from Simon like he walked away from her. I loved her story about how she attacked a girl after she first transformed, and that Luke took her back to that girl to make sure she was okay, which just goes to show how differently they handled their situations. Maya still had morals and a conscience about her, whereas Jordan took such a coward's way out. She got to say that she wasn't angry about him turning her, she was more angry at him walking away and not checking on her, which explains perfectly why he is such a shitty character. Yes, he might have good intentions at the time. Yes, bad things have happened to him because he was turned into a werewolf, but none of that excuses the way he treated Maya. So I was exceptionally proud of her when she got to put him in his place at the end of this episode. What I will say is that scene really made me emotional, not just because of what Maya was saying, but for some reason watching that scene just made it hit home how far we've come in terms of this adaptation. After the movie went to shit, I never thought we'd get the chance to see so much of the Mortal Instruments content turned into an adaptation, because, you know, our chance was gone after that film. And for some reason, this episode just really made me think about the fact that we've gotten all this content now. All this material that we've read and loved before have been adapted to screen and have been put in front of our eyes. I don't know why it was specifically the scene between Jordan and Maya that made me think about that, but it did. Yes, the show is very different from the books in certain ways, but it's also following along the same lines. I never expected to see an adaptation of City of Fallen Angels. So yeah, that was something that happened during my viewing of this episode. I had a little emo moment because I love these books so much, so to see them come to life in a new way means a lot. So they were the main two things going on in this episode. There were lots of wonderful little scenes thrown in amongst everything as well, like the scene between Magnus and Katarina. I liked that she was telling him not to blame himself for giving that potion to Lilith. Of course, we had a brief Malik scene as well. I was expecting a lot more angst this episode, but we didn't really get that. We got Alec apologising to Magnus for the way that he behaved during their argument. They hugged it out. There was a lot of hugging going on in this episode. I am all about the hugs. Tragedy and tension brings people together like nothing else. So I am Very nervous about next week to see what happens. Clary's been arrested. Who knows what's going to happen with her? As always, there's probably lots that I have forgotten to mention. So if there's anything you want to talk about, then please feel free to discuss it down in the comments. I will be back here next week with another video for you all. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye!